We are delighted that this episode of Starts at the Top is sponsored by Avato CRM Solutions. Avato CRM Solutions designs and delivers award-winning customer service, business process outsourcing, and digital and intelligent automation solutions for some of the world's most respected brands, as well as innovative charity and public sector clients. They partner with clients to help them define their customer experience and transformation strategies by implementing the right technology, people, and processes to improve their customer journey while driving new efficiencies and helping them prepare for the future. To find out more about how Avato CRM Solutions could help an organisation like yours, and to receive a free, no obligation chat, visit avato.co.uk/Wales Air Ambulance.
It's not just a tick box exercise anymore. It has to offer something that adds value, both from a consumer standpoint, but also from an employee standpoint.
Welcome to a brand new episode of Starts at the Top, our podcast about digital leadership and change. I'm Paul Thomas.
And I'm Zoe Emma. This week is Volunteers Week in the UK, and so it's fitting that our guest on the podcast today is Kim Perlow, CEO of Link Up London, an organisation that harnesses professional skills for social good through skilled volunteering.
So Link Up's approach struck a chord. A friend of mine, Sophie, started to work for them. We are hoping to hear from Sophie. Started to work for them after volunteering through Link Up London a few months ago. And it really struck a chord with me just because of their approach to harnessing professional skills within organisations rather than the old traditional approach to volunteering, which is, corporate organisations sending in a bunch of people to paint a wall or to build a greenhouse out of plastic bottles, or the things that we've all done in the past.
100%, Paul. And both you and I have been brought together through many things, but also a shared love of volunteering. And we're both long-standing volunteers for various organisations. What's been your most memorable experience as a volunteer?
Well, I think since about 3 years ago now, I decided to approach a local charity that I was part of a fundraising evening, and they were sort of stood up on stage saying, this is the help we need. And I thought, well, I can help with the digital marketing side of this. They stepped up and said, happy to come in. And 3-4 years later, I'm a trustee, and working with them on a very regular basis across all of the things that they are doing in the local community here where I live in Hemel Hempstead, which is Decorum, the Decorum Community Trust. So I think that's the most memorable one for me, was that just by sort of going off and having a conversation with a charity that was clearly in need of some skilled experience, suddenly led to an opportunity where I'm hopefully doing some really good stuff with them week in, week out. So that was probably it for me. How about you?
Well, I think my most memorable experience was being a trustee, and I've done, God, it's something like 15 years as a trustee across various different boards. I think 4 different boards, showing my age. But my most amazing experience as a trustee has absolutely been serving as a trustee at Charity Digital. I recently started my 2nd term, and it's just such a privilege to volunteer in that way because, as you were saying, you get to use your skills, and also you get to meet lots of interesting people and be involved in helping shape the future of an organisation. So every time I go to board meeting, it sounds cheesy, but I really do feel very, very fortunate to be able to volunteer and help that charity.
Yeah, really good to be able to do it, and even sort of dragging my family into it. There was an event in the park recently where we were selling sweets for the charity, and both my youngest and my wife came along to help sell the sweets. So, it's all good. You just drag people into it. And also the privilege that you have to then introduce other people and other volunteers to the organisation, which I've hopefully managed to do on more than one occasion. Anyway, Zoe, this week, as seems to be every week at the moment, there's a lot of noise in the news about AI again, and you wanted to share one story.
Yes, more AI news following our brief update about AI regulation last week. So we had some developments from the Centre for AI Safety, and they shared a single sentence statement. It was signed by leaders from OpenAI, who obviously have the ChatGPT product, DeepMind, and other notable leaders in this space. It's not an especially helpful statement, I think, because it's simply a one sentence statement suggesting some of the risks that AI can pose. In fact, it might have been better as a tweet, perhaps, rather than just a one sentence statement. I think what's slightly frustrating about this is it's useful in the sense that we obviously need to be talking as societies and in business about the risks and working out how we can better regulate AI and how we can create more of the right guardrails around it as it is developed and scaled further. As Rory Stewart was saying on the Rest is Politics podcast, which is an AI special today, and we'll pop a link to that in the show notes as well. It would be really helpful if these tech leaders, who frankly know more about these tools than anyone, could actually be specific about some of the areas of risk. And in my view, also have some clear suggestions about what can be done to mitigate those risks. And for example, that could be various areas of regulation or different sectors, really focusing on growing skills, or perhaps a different approach to venture capital or grant funding in the case of the charity sector. So I think it would be wonderful if they could be a bit more specific about what the nature of these risks are, the impact they could have, and the actions that they would like decision makers to take in order to mitigate those risks.
Yeah, it's quite exciting, actually. I'm just on the site now. The statement itself is just this. Mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. So in one sentence, they've set panic in the way that nobody's seen since Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And at the bottom of this statement, you can filter all the signatories by AI scientists and notable figures. I like the way they form a distinction between the two. And the other thing I really liked about this was in the BBC story about it, was the good news that Rishi Sunak says, but it'll be all right. AI is good, as well as sort of leading to our ultimate extinction. So if Rishi's all right with it, then I'm sure we should be all right with it too.
That's quite interesting, because hasn't Rishi called recently to have a firmer hand on the regulation? And obviously, as we said last week, there's a government white paper out at the moment, so it's very timely. So I feel like that's potentially a slightly mixed message there. But anyway, we'll see what happens next with it.
He's essentially saying that there are benefits to the economy and society, which would assume that that's come out of that meeting as well. So he's talked about all the good things that are coming out of AI, and it is a balance, isn't it? There is a number of I used to work with an AI organisation who were doing great things with the RNIB around support for those with sight loss and blindness, and there is some great stuff going on, but equally, we probably do need to be mindful. I might joke and sort of talk about the stories of science fiction, but a lot that has been written as science fiction has come to pass. So we do need to keep an eye on these things. So good that they are flagging it. Not very helpful that it was a single sentence statement. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. But then, what do we know, Zoe? We are just two lowly podcasters. Anyway, just ahead of our conversation with Kim, here's a short case study from Sophie Bradley. Sophie, who is now working for Link Up London, who started as a volunteer, tells us a bit about her story and why she thinks Link Up London is such a great organisation to work for.
Throughout my professional career, I have always been involved with charitable organisations, whether that's as a volunteer on the ground floor, whether that's as a donor, a fundraiser, or to raise awareness about that charity. But last year, something changed. I had a light bulb moment. I became aware of an organisation called Link Up London through one of my previous social media marketing students, and I decided I was going to sign up. The idea of being able to share my professional skills and for others to share their professional skills with social good organisations, which incorporates community groups, small to medium-sized charities and social enterprises in the London area, just seemed so amazing. What a wonderful way to be able to utilise your professional skills to help others to develop their skills, put in place tools that they may need to be able to work more effectively so that they can actually do the work that they are designed to do, which is to work with the communities that they have always strived to do more effectively and build stronger communities. It's just a win-win situation. Gave me so many light bulb moments, I cannot explain them. I saw that a role became available at Link Up London to lead on a new programme supporting social good organisations. I thought, yes, let's get on board with this. I applied. Fortuitously, I was successful. And now we are in the middle of launching this new programme called the Be Heard programme, where the most amazing marketing and comms professionals are coming on board. I'm still working part-time as a freelance social media marketer. The balance between the two is fantastic. It means that I can support others and champion others and help to grow strong, diverse communities in the London area whilst continuing to develop my professional skills in both areas. Absolutely fantastic. And that's my story.
On to our interview with Kim Perlow. Kim Perlow is the founder and CEO of Link Up London, an organisation that harnesses professional skills for social good through skilled volunteering. Link Up, which started in 2016, is committed to building stronger communities and offering meaningful volunteer opportunities by connecting skilled professionals with charitable organisations in areas such as legal, finance, human resources, communications, marketing, data, strategy and organisational development, and much, much more. Link Up developed out of Kim's experience with organisational development, combined with an understanding of the value of volunteering and some of its challenges. From her own professional experience and personal volunteering, with the goal of providing valuable volunteering opportunities that fit into busy people's lives. Prior to Link Up, Kim worked for 5 years as COO and then Senior Advisor at the London-based Institute for Strategic Dialogue, a think tank, and before that she spent nearly a decade leading and consulting to a number of civil society development programmes internationally, focused on building the charity sector in countries of economic transition. She has experience with organisational development, volunteer management, cross-sector partnerships and grant making, and has focused on issues of philanthropy, corporate social responsibility and employer volunteer programmes at different times throughout her career. Kim, welcome to Starts at the Top.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
You're more than welcome. So we're launching this episode in Volunteers Week 2023, which is an annual celebration of the contribution that millions of people, including Zoe and myself and you, Kim, make across the UK through volunteering in their communities. So how do you view the condition of volunteering in 2023?
It's a really interesting question. There's a lot of talk about it at the moment. A report just came out from NCVO called Time Well Spent, which has made the claim that volunteering has actually gone down since or in the last year. So it's gone from 23% of the population volunteering in the UK down to 16% of the population volunteering. There's sort of a number of reasons for that. I mean, I would actually say it's in transition. Some people are saying it's in crisis. I think actually crisis, to be honest, will lead to opportunity. And we're sort of in this transitional space at the moment of sort of from the pre-pandemic sort of way of volunteering that had always sort of been the way of doing it to sort of the space that we currently find ourselves in. There's been a changing demographic. So that's one of the big things is the majority of volunteers had been sort of the 50 plus previously, and they had sort of been involved in longer term, more regular volunteering. And that's changing. That group actually pulled out of volunteering during COVID more than any other group, and has re-entered more slowly in terms of the volunteering that is being done. But then what has happened is you see sort of the younger population stepping up. And from anecdotal information and from what we've seen, you definitely see sort of kind of the mid-career, sort of people that we hadn't previously seen signing up in large numbers, getting involved. And I think the other thing the pandemic did was sort of so many people went out. It connected people more with their communities, and people went out to support their communities. Volunteering became accessible for many people, although there are those examples of people wanting to volunteer and not being able to. But there was sort of this growth of mutual aid going on. There's all sorts of things happening on the community level that people could get involved with, and so it feels like it's sort of the younger generation sort of was exposed to it in a different way through that, and we're seeing kind of the trends of that sort of evolving out. I think the other piece that really happened during and post COVID is sort of the virtual space became an acceptable space for volunteering. A lot of organizations worked hard to sort of create that space quickly, and it's not gone away. And actually, some people are finding it to be a much easier way to volunteer. I mean, for us, we went virtual as well, and it makes it really possible. We now allow people to have opportunities either in person or in the virtual space, but it really allows for much more flexibility. And so that space for volunteering is sort of becoming a more prominent space. So we actually haven't seen a decrease in the type of work that we're doing at all in terms of volunteer sign up. We have seen sort of that the trends, we have seen the younger people sort of engaging with us, and we have seen we've seen that the virtual space really works well. I think what they're looking for, and there's something out there, I don't know, you're probably familiar with it, the Vision for Volunteering, again by NCVO, which is sort of a 10-year kind of vision for what volunteering should become or can become, and sort of how it's evolving at the moment. And there was a discussion last week sort of on this, and sort of some of the themes that came out is like this real need for micro volunteering opportunities. So something short and sweet that you can get into, but you don't have to have a long-term commitment for. Maybe less bureaucracy around some of the volunteering. So make it more accessible, make it easier, make it possible, which isn't possible in every circumstance by any stretch of the imagination, because you probably do need DBS checks and certain things for some types of volunteering, but there's other ways. So it's looking at, are there other ways that people can engage that is different than kind of what the way we've traditionally seen and referred to volunteering.
That's so interesting about the rise in mid-career volunteering. What do you think has led to that, Kim?
So interestingly, I mean, we're seeing it. So I say that more from a skilled volunteering perspective. So that's what we actually do. And I think we've really seen the rise in that. And I would say, from the conversations we've had, both with our volunteers and sort of, looking at the trends that we're seeing, it's coming from this understanding sort of that volunteering is possible. So I think the problem with the mid-career is people are incredibly busy, right? Like that's when you're sort of on the rise in your career. You're probably, you may be having children, carrying responsibilities come into play. There's all sorts of things. And so it's actually quite challenging, at the best of times to sort of carve out that time to volunteer unless you're, hugely committed. But you can come up with every excuse under the sun not to do it, no matter how much you want to. And I think from COVID, again, sort of that connection to community, that connection to giving back, that connection to doing something important and meaningful, people really did reconsider their lives a lot. I know it sort of feels like we talk about that a lot, but people did step back and say, where is the meaning in everything I'm doing? So there's more of a drive for that potentially. And I think with the skilled volunteering, it's becoming clearer and clearer that, this actually is offering career advantages. It's not just, so there's skills development involved in it. It's not a one way. It's not a one way. I'm giving my skills to this organization. The evidence that we have of people sort of benefiting professionally from the experience is huge.
And you're currently going through the process of launching a new corporate program, Social Impact Solutions, which aims at directly answering that question. People within organisations with skills that they have to offer, being able to offer them within communities. Can you tell us a bit more about that program and how you're aiming to run it?
Yeah, of course. We're really excited about this program, actually, and it's been a few years in the making. So the work that we do normally we don't work specifically with corporates. However, the majority of our volunteers come from the corporate space, but we're not in partnerships with companies to bring those volunteers in. However, there's a huge kind of resource sitting in these companies that we're really excited about trying to figure out how do we mobilize and get those skills kind of into the surrounding communities and create more sort of strategic engagement. So actually offering something to the organizations, the charitable organizations they're working with, that goes sort of beyond your traditional kind of team building or volunteer activity where you're cleaning the river or painting the fence or whatever it is that you're doing, but trying to sort of harness those skills and bring them in a sort of a structured way into the community. So we've worked over the past many years to develop this model of skilled volunteering, which is not just sort of a platform where we connect people, but is very much we have a very kind of human approach to this. We talk to all our volunteers, we talk to all our organizations. We're always present at initial matches. We create project plans to help them deliver, which allows us to then be part of monitoring and supporting along the way, because we have a clear understanding of what they're looking to achieve. Our projects, I should say, they're short term. So they can be anywhere from a few hours to 6 months, but we tend to cap it at 6 months. You come in and you deliver something. It makes it feel quite manageable from the volunteer standpoint. So what we've done with the corporate program is really take this model and what we know has worked, and sort of package it in a way that corporates could access and get their employees involved. So we have sort of different options, different ways you can get involved in a 2-hour event, a 1-day event, or sort of a longer term 3-month kind of process that you have teams working together to support organizations.
What sort of size of organizations are we talking about? So on the corporate side, we're talking mainly bigger organizations, I guess, with the sort of fully fledged programs, but the charities, the organizations that people are volunteering into, presumably are much smaller to medium size, or how does it work?
So exactly. I mean, the companies, it's interesting. It's a real mix of companies. So that have, that we're engaging with. So some are quite large, and others are, working to design a program. And I think this is sort of, it's so not all of them have an established program that we're working with. They're looking at ways that they can engage. I think skilled volunteering in general is beginning to start sort of moving up in people's agenda, because they're looking at the potential for different options for people to volunteer. That I think it's beginning to sort of, some companies, not all of them, but some are beginning to understand that there's sort of a kind of, not everybody wants to do the same type of thing. And enforced team building is not necessarily a fun and positive experience for everybody. And that there's other ways to do this that would feel more authentic to their employees and actually and benefit them more. So it's been a real range of companies, to be honest. In terms of the organizations that we work with on the ground, the charitable organizations we work with on the ground, they are small to medium sized, which could be, there's 168,000 charities registered in the UK. About 26,000 of them are in London, and about 80% of those or more are small. So the majority of the organizations out there are quite small. They're community based. Small meaning there's different kind of criteria for small, but some will say it's 1 million, an annual turnover of 1 million. For us, we do work with ones that are 1 million to 5 million, but the majority are probably around the 100,000 mark in terms of their turnover. So they do have staff. They're in there. They're doing really good work in the community. With that said, we work across the range. So we do work with very micro organizations that are just starting out. Some of the bigger ones, but to be honest, the bigger ones can afford consultants. So this, isn't necessarily the right space for them.
And I know you've talked to Paul before about how smart use of volunteering can help leaders take a step back and look at the bigger picture. What is the best way for leaders to do that? Because it's so hard to get the headspace to think differently, think creatively as a leader, isn't it?
I think it's really hard. And I think that one of the biggest challenge, especially with the size of the organizations we're working with, is just time. People are overworked and under-resourced. And I think that's true across the sector at the moment, that these organizations, there's been huge demand on them through COVID, cost of living crisis, Ukraine, the invasion of Ukraine. This is all sort of had a significant effect on these organizations. And need is definitely going up in communities and resources are going down. So there's a lot of strain on these organizations. And a lot of them will say, I just feel like I'm chasing my tail. I just need to keep going. You're treading water. And so it's hard to sort of create that space. But we do work with them to sort of talk about that, if you can just, if we can cut out some of that time and bring somebody in to work with you, that's going to ultimately save a lot of time, as we all know, right? If we can take that breathing space. We don't impose anything on these organizations. We work toward their priorities, but we will encourage. And interestingly, what we're seeing right now, and it's sort of those trends throughout the year. So at the beginning of the year, it's been a lot of craziness and no one's had time to even think. And they're beginning to have time to think about development. And then if you can step back, and you can have somebody come in and just start talking to you, asking you questions about what you're doing and help you think. I mean, that always generates an interesting comment, right? You always helps you think. If somebody from the outside comes in and sort of like, what is it that you do, right? And you're talking to somebody all of a sudden who doesn't, speak your language in the same way. It really helps you try to sort of work through some of the issues that you're having. And we hear that a lot. I mean, the organizations really appreciate having that, and it's not an easy thing to find. So, right, in terms of the way, so that actually is out there, that exists right now. So being, for us to be able to offer that to them, to have somebody who, has had, we have a few, incredible volunteers out there right now who actually are retired, but have had these massive careers, doing just incredible things, starting, from startup companies, growing them into sort of major corporations. And we have another one who, had been actually started as a surgeon and then went into kind of managing research for King's College cardiology, and then went into running hospitals, right? And and he's just amazing in the way he thinks. And, he'll go into these organizations and sit down with them. It's huge, and I feel lucky when I get to have conversations with them, right? Because they'll start asking those questions. So it's just trying to helping them think about the value of that space and then being able to pull away at the right time for them in terms of the work that's going on.
Yeah, brilliant. And what an amazing base of skills to tap into, and what a broad range of skills to tap into as well.
I'm regularly in awe still of the people that sign up to volunteer for us, because it's just incredible to me, the people who are out there that are willing to do this. And they come to us, again, up till now, they've come to us on their own, not through sort of any corporate program, but they've come to us and said, I'm willing to do this. And there's a huge variety. About 70% of them are coming from senior leadership, sort of management roles, and have significant experience. What has been really fascinating, however, is that, a lot of people still have imposter syndrome And we're hearing this regularly of people sort of saying, well, you've gotten so, people will get so narrow in their careers and they become this expert, up here, that they sort of are like, well, I can't, it's recognizing kind of the value of your skills. And that, even though you're an expert at one thing, Paul, you're a great example. You're an expert in the digital space, but you're running your own company. There's so many different parts of or skills, both of you actually, right, that you could offer that aren't just the digital space, right, that you could come in and do strategy, or you could come in and at least there's just a lot out there, and people struggle to recognize that. And I think that is one of the things that we hear, from the experience, is that real valuing of sort of the broader range of skills they have, as well as valuing the skills themselves. If you take yourself out of a company that you've been in for 20 years, and apply those skills in a different way, you can see the value of those skills that you don't necessarily see in your day-to-day work. So for example, like if you're an accountant, then you're in an apartment of 50, right? And you're just one of the many people churning something out. Then you come in and work with an organization, are able to, probably quite easily for you, restructure their finance system, which is like just huge for this organization, right? And the change that you can make for them, you begin to really see the value of what you have to offer. And you can take that back in to the workplace. And people do regularly. It helps them really think slightly differently.
I think you can probably you can achieve a bit more as well through a sort of a simple conversation or volunteering, rather than thinking, actually, I'm out. That's something that I don't feel comfortable with, or if imposter syndrome is a real thing, right? Not just people try to sort of push it down. It's real. So rather than thinking, oh, this is someone I can help long term, it's more, how can I apply my skills to a simple conversation or a simple series of conversations, a meeting over coffee. That mentoring, coaching side of what Zoe and I will do, where sometimes you can't sort of wrap a project around something. Mm-hmm. Sometimes somebody just needs a conversation or a helping hand to get them over the hurdle, and I think that's probably a lot of what you're talking about here. So it's really interesting. I've just remembered back to during the pandemic, and Zoe, I'm not sure whether you were part of this as well, but there was something I did called Digital Candle, which was I think it was that
it's Matt Collins. Matt Collins from Platypus. Shout out to Matt.
Yeah, shout out to Matt. So Matt Collins at Platypus Digital, who set it up. And that was, I think the commitment was an hour. An hour's conversation with somebody that you were matched to. You'd say, right, these are my digital marketing experiences. This is my experience, and somebody would say, well, this is what I need help with, and then you'd be matched. And I had a really interesting conversation with someone who I still stay in touch with now, and it was enough for him to have a conversation that sort of sparked, as you said, a few ideas. A way forwards out of a conundrum that he was in, and then you've got a real connection that you can build on moving forwards as well. So sometimes it's the power of just having a conversation rather than really thinking about how do I sort of delve in, especially as you said, the examples of going in and painting a wall or building a greenhouse or something like that doesn't really contribute anything to the overall organizational strategy.
No, and I think that's really true. I mean, we do have a number of projects, that are more of a series of conversations, sort of more strategic, and not necessarily we're creating a new strategy or something like that, but just more strategic or supporting or mentoring. And we also run something actually that we call flash consulting, which is sort of that idea of it's an hour conversation, but it's sort of structured, and the organizations come with kind of a challenge that they're facing at that moment, and we pair them with a volunteer, and just that hour conversation, that ends with an action plan for the organization, basically, is enough to really move a number of them forward. I think there's so many different ways. I think it goes back to sort of the original kind of discussion on, like, volunteering isn't just one way of doing something. There's so many different ways you can get involved and share what you know, and help others. And it's finding the right opportunity for you. And I think that for us as well is, and it's how do you fit into busy schedules, because everyone's busy. And so the way we're structured is very much about creating opportunities that allow people to engage in a way that works for their schedules, and not the other way around, so that we're able to get those skills in to the organization. So that could be, they're working at night, they're doing whatever, but it's based on milestones. So they don't have to be somewhere every, Thursday at 3, which isn't going to work for them.
Yeah. And what trends are you noticing? Well, so there's a lot of skills out there in the corporate sector, and we just went through in your introduction, talked about a number of them: marketing, digital marketing, finance, all sorts of different things. Where are the trends currently pointing? What are people asking for help with?
So interestingly, at my team meeting today, we were just talking about, all right, what do we need to be focused on? And for the 7th week in a row, it's social media is the use of the digital space, which you guys know well. And I think that COVID, really played a part in this, although it was coming probably more slowly previously. But for the sector, they're really still playing. I think they were playing catch up for a fair amount of COVID, and was quite reactionary. And now I think it's about trying to get on top of it and becoming more strategic with it. And so we're really beginning to see, we've seen a really, we've always seen, so comms has always been kind of one of the key areas, because it's not resourced as well as other things, right? So it's the area that, in a sense, is hugely important to organizations, but it's sort of it's quite under-resourced in terms of where organizations are able to place their funds and their focus. So comms has always been really important, but social media and the digital space right now is so big that we're actually, and I think, Paul, this, we're launching a program called the Be Heard program right now, which is specifically geared toward kind of a more strategic approach to helping organizations with their communication. So it's sort of a series of 3 projects based on a sort of an initial assessment of where their needs are in this space, and then trying to bring different volunteers in to work with them over the course of a year to really help them develop this out in a way that works for them and for their own capacity. And I think that's huge too. A lot of these organizations, you can come in and people can come in with great ideas and great experience, but if you come in and offer them something that, is going to require £5,000 for them to deliver, well, they don't have that £5,000. So you got to come in and understand the capacity they have to actually deliver it and the resources they have available. And so I think that's for our volunteers. I mean, it really forces creativity for some people. If you're in a marketing department, you're used to working with a big budget that can sort of solve this problem. All of a sudden you can't, right? And you have to sort of, really think about what you know. And I think that's where some of the professional development and the learning comes from, always, no matter what level you're at, to really work through some of this. But the digital space is a real demand at the moment.
And speaking of that kind of variety of skills and also some of the changes that you've seen as well, you mentioned that lots of organisations are shifting their CSR agenda towards ESG strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be great to hear a bit more from you about what that means for where charities are seeking to engage with charities then, based around that shift from CSR towards ESG.
I think it's really around the idea that CSR started in the 1970s as a sort of as an idea and built, but it never was able to fully integrate into companies' business strategies. And, some companies do it really well and they were able to, but the majority, it was always sort of running alongside it. It was the nice to have. It was great for the marketing team. Maybe you got to tick the box that you had done it, that's going to help you with something, but it wasn't really part of the company. And I think what ESG is trying to do is build upon that and really make it more a strategic part of the work that a company is doing. It becomes part of the business case, part of their strategy. And I think that, is in reaction to, the continually major crises that are out in the world. People are demanding it. They want a solution. So it's not just, we're going to go out and make money now. We're going to go out, how is that going to affect the climate? All these major crises that are out there that the companies are beginning to be demanded by consumers and employees to pay attention to. And so it's sort of this trend is reactionary in that sense. I think what it's also looking at is it's making it more measurable. It's focusing on impact. It's making sort of, you need to be able to show what you've actually done as a company. And so for the work we're doing, I mean, it means that they're looking, companies are now needing to find more sort of, it's not just a tick box exercise anymore. It has to be more meaningful. It has to offer something that adds value, both from a consumer standpoint, but also from an employee standpoint. And so I think those connections, and again, that's sort of going to be the transition slightly from the painting the fence to other activities. It doesn't always have to be skilled volunteering, but there's other ways you can engage with organizations that really meet their needs. You need to understand what they need, not just what you need, right? And create something that works for both. There's so many really interesting, examples out there when a company just really starts thinking about it and working with an organization to identify how they could do something together that really makes a huge difference to both of them, not just to one or the other.
I wanted to ask about Big Help Out, obviously a huge high profile campaign about encouraging more people to get involved in volunteering. What's your take on that campaign? And do you think it's going to lead to long-term change around interest in volunteering?
It's a good question. I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk about it, and I know that if you go onto their website, they say 6 million people got involved, which is incredible. If you think about some of the stats that are coming out about sort of the numbers of people that were involved during COVID, which is about 12 million. So that's a lot of people, that's 6 million in terms of volunteering on the day. And I think that, it feeds into this idea that there's really been there's this decrease in volunteering, and people are looking for how to, organizations are looking for how do we get more volunteers involved and engaged. So I don't think there's ever anything wrong with raising the visibility of that. And, this was a big opportunity to do it. I know there's been a lot of debate about connecting it to the coronation versus not. And, there's all sorts of different things, but in and of itself, I think it offers opportunity. I think it's sort of about what happens next with it. So some organizations have, on their own initiative, taken it forward and tried to turn it into a connection to Volunteer Week and sort of building upon, because Volunteer Week is coming up, right? So that month, and using this month to really grow. A number of organizations used it, just as a way to provide information sessions about their volunteering to engage more volunteers. So if there's a way to continue it, if it can become a sort of an annual activity that does tie into Volunteer Week, or it's about raising the awareness is great. People need to, or organizations need volunteers, and there's got to be a lot of ways to help people find them. This is potentially one way of doing that. It'll be interesting to see, and I'm not sure anyone will be tracking this, to be honest, but, from this experience, from the organizations that had volunteers, do any of them, translate into longer term volunteers? Are they people that stay engaged, or is it a one-off? Do they get more involved, maybe just as a funder or a donor or a supporter or whatnot, but has it provided kind of a value to that organization in some way? So I think it's really hard to know. But I don't think anything that raises the visibility of it is a bad thing, necessarily. It would be more about the longevity of it, as you said, and I think that's hugely important, because a one-off is a one-off. So how do you turn it into something that's more substantial than that? I'd be curious what your thoughts are, though. I mean, were you involved in it?
No, I wasn't. I mean, I know quite a lot of people who were involved in it. It was great to see the charity sector getting so much coverage and suddenly being a big national news story consistently. So I was really proud of the sector for that. as you say, I'm very interested to see where this goes in the long run, whether they can sustain that growth and interest in volunteering. I really hope they can, because I think that volunteering has been so instrumental to how I've developed my skills and my career. I think that Paul would probably say something similar.
That was my experience of, I did a volunteering exercise, if you like, in Grant Thornton, where it was a local organisation, a local charity, who had a series of local charity shops, and a team of us went and worked in a shop for one day, did the sort of the traditional thing where you turn up and you disappear at the end of the day. However, I got involved in a conversation with somebody from the communications team who was telling me about, well, these are the challenges that we have. And I said, well, why don't I pop in and try and help you? And then I was sort of in and out of that organisation for about 2 years, on and off, happily helping them with things like social media and marketing strategy and communication strategies and stuff like that. So you just need to be there and you need to ask the questions, I think, sometimes is the answer. I guess it's ironic, isn't it? It's a bit weird to say it, but did that open up as well opportunities for another generation, but a generation that really, I don't know, doesn't really engage, or it's a tough thing, isn't it? The sort of the engagement levels around the coronation. I was stood in a field volunteering for my the charity that I'm a trustee of. I was in our local park watching this on a screen, and there were a mixture of people in the park. It was raining, a mixture of people in the park, but it was families, but with young children. So it was young children that had been sort of forced into, go to the park and sit in the rain and watch the coronation on the big screen. But there was a severe gap, I guess, with sort of younger volunteers or younger people that might sort of look at that and look at the opportunity over that weekend and get involved. So it would just be how it sort of ties in, I guess, with the overall sense of that event, and as you said, tying it in annually with something that's a bit more focused on the opportunity of volunteering, I think is probably a very, very smart move, because I'm not sure how well it connected more generally. But talking of young people and the next generation, this is a generation that's now sort of entering the workplace that is, demanding more. They want to work. It goes back to your original point about lockdown and the changes we made. We sort of wanted to start working more locally. We wanted to work with organisations, or we wanted to be more community focused, add real value to the places we live in and the communities we live in and the work that we do. So what's your experience, and how do you look at this new generation entering the workplace and what they want from their employers? Is that changing your approach at Link Up? Are you having to sort of go after that generation, or is that generation coming to you?
Yeah. Good question. I think youth volunteering in general is sort of a whole conversation on its own, because I know there's challenges, and that is one of the areas that there's real discussion about. How do we get the youth kind of engaged in volunteering in more strategic ways? But in answer to this, I think it's been really interesting for us. So we are seeing more and more of them through COVID and beyond finding us. But there's a real drive in many of them. So it's interesting from a volunteering standpoint. Maybe they're not as engaged, but from a social justice standpoint, there's a lot of passion about social impact and doing things that are good, and climate change, and sort of making sure that your company is holding true to the values it claims. So you come in being told something, and they want to see that being delivered, and we all know they are very happy to pick up and go to another company if they don't see it. There's much more movement within this generation. But what we are seeing is that in a number of cases that they've come and volunteered with us, and they're taking it back to their companies and pushing and saying, you need to get involved in this. You need to do this. We want to see more opportunities like this, which has been really, really interesting for us to, that they're really sort of looking to be heard around it. And so I think there is it's a really interesting generation to be engaged with. But I do think because of sort of, the past few years combined with sort of this real drive from them for sort of social engagement, we're really seeing them sort of start getting more involved in these types of opportunities, that sort of the types that we're offering, and I'm sure others are too, but that are, that are really offering them something meaningful, and that they feel like they're able to make a real difference and be connected to their community. So our feedback, 94% will tell us that as a result of their project with us, they do feel that they've really contributed to the community. And also, and I think along those lines, we get 91% will talk about skills development, and and all the different pieces of that, be it communications or leadership, or just the different opportunities they're valuing, or seeing your skills in a different way, or actually learning, thinking about things differently. And then 94% will also talk about sort of issues around well-being. And it does, we know volunteering in general, there's sort of a real kind of the reason people engage with it, right, is most people will say they want to, they want to make a difference. They want to do something. They want to contribute. They want to give back. And we definitely see that coming through quite regularly as well. But it's about, the well-being is being affected. People are feeling more confident. They're feeling that they have, they're feeling happier. They're feeling that they have opportunities in the future. It's really interesting, the feedback that we're getting around it as well. So I think there is it's an interesting generation. And I think there's a huge potential and possibilities.
It's great. Yeah, we'll have to dig out the stats, but there is a stat that I saw recently. We can put it in the show notes, but a stat that sort of talks about the impact, or the positive impact on volunteers turning up at parkrun and helping parkrun sessions run on a Saturday morning versus the runners of parkrun. Yeah. It's a huge impact on the people that are turning up to volunteer.
Yeah.
But we'll figure that one out. But thank you so much for your time. It's great to hear what Link Up is doing and what you're achieving. Where can people find you, whether they're Gen Z or leaders of charities looking for help, or leaders in big organizations looking to do things differently? How is it best to connect with you and Link Up?
Well, our website is a great starting point in terms of what we're up to and just getting a better sense of who we are, which is it's linkuplondon, all one word, .org. But I'm very happy for people to reach out directly. If you're on our website, you can easily apply either to volunteer or to engage with us as an organization, or if you're a company that's interested in engaging as well. And we are a small but very responsive team. And so we do get back. We feel, as I said, strongly about the human interaction piece of it. And so we are engaged with the sort of the different people we work with. And I would just say, from a call to action sort of standpoint, that, I think all skills are valuable. People need to recognize that they have something to offer. And I think looking at volunteering outside of the traditional lens of I'm going to go out and work in the food bank, which there's nothing wrong with that at all, but that there's these, these other ways of doing it, and that organizations as well are learning about this other way. It's not natural for them either. So there's sort of a lot of opportunity out there for people to engage and use their skills and think about how they can contribute and give back through them.
Thank you so much to Kim for coming onto the podcast and sharing her views on volunteering. If you'd like to find more, the links to Link Up London's website will be in the show notes. And Kim has also suggested you can directly connect with her on LinkedIn. She'd be more than happy to talk to you.
Next up in a couple of weeks is our conversation with Donna White of the Prince's Trust, who will be discussing how your organisation can best market itself online during a cost of living crisis. It's a great conversation. We can't wait to share it with you. In the meantime, you can find us on Twitter. We're at startsattethetop1, and you can also email us at startsattethetop@gmail.com.
And if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you can rate and review, please do. It really, really helps us with our reach and getting in front of more listeners. So we'd love you to leave us a review if you can. And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
See you soon. Thanks for listening.
Bye.